I'm going to say this ahead of time. If you haven't started yet, don't start it. If you already started it, it's fine. No, it's fine. Don't stop it because now it's going to be too hard. Just let go. We are recording it because Miss Connie requested that we record it. So what that means is I'm going to ask you to be maybe a little outside of your comfort zone or what we normally do. We tend to get into conversations and then we kind of break off into little conversations. That'll be harder to do because this mic picks up everything. So we'll try to not just blurt out, kind of raise your hands so that we can do one-on-one conversations and it'll be a little bit more clear. We won't record it every week, but since they were out of town this week, she really wanted to hear this conversation. So just try to do that if you can, to the best of your ability. All right. We began last week looking at the sixth commandment. We kind of had done our work into thou shalt not kill or murder. And we were just about to start the ethical conversation around abortion. Now, what is the fundamental question we have to ask when we talk about the issue of abortion? Yeah. Yeah, and that's probably the big crux. I basically said the same thing. I said it a little different. What is the unborn, right? What is the unborn? So, and everything kind of turns on this. Is the unborn child a human life made in the image of God, or is it not? So that's the question, right? And where do we fall on that? I understand we're going to work our way down on this conversation. So we're going to start at the biggest thing. Now, I tend to have a feeling where I know most of us fall on this. But let's ask the question anyway. What is the unborn? Is the unborn child a human life made in the image of God? Yes. Yes. Christian theology, not just Reformed theology, but Christian theology historically has answered this question yes, based on several things. All human beings bear God's image. Genesis 1:27. You can go to Psalm 139:13. Providence of God in the womb. I've known you from their very womb. We go other places. Jeremiah 1:5, Luke 1:41. Personal identity before birth. So if the unborn human, if the unborn is truly human, then the sixth commandment applies fully. And this is why we treat abortion not as a marginal issue, but as one that falls directly under the prohibition against the taking of innocent life. It is murder. So this applies not only to the act itself, but any participation of, encouragement of, or facilitation of abortion. All of it is the breaking of this commandment. So participation, encouragement, or facilitation, what are we talking about there? So it's having an abortion, encouraging someone else to have an abortion, or facilitating doing abortions.
Being in a medical field area, I mean, isn't a doctor Hippocratic oath? I understand what you're saying, but isn't it their obligation, though, medical, that they can advise for having that? Or what if it's the life of the mother? How would that jive with everything?
All right, so now we're going to get into this difficult circumstance conversation is the question?
Before we get
Yeah.
too far into that, can we talk about what a pregnancy is and what an abortion is? Because a fetus planted in the wrong place, an ectopic pregnancy is.
So I actually have that exact thing under difficult circumstances, ectopic pregnancy.
But is it really difficult?
So I guess it depends on how you define difficult, right? It's certainly difficult for the individuals. So if I'm a couple who's trying to have a baby and we have an ectopic pregnancy, and maybe we've been trying for a long time and this happens, then it's probably pretty difficult for them, right?
I think it's difficult, but an ectopic pregnancy cannot result in a baby.
It's not viable.
Yeah.
No, it's not important.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is,
The virgin had a baby. That's impossible.
Say, what did you say?
I said a virgin had a baby.
that wasn't an ectopic pregnancy.
No.
I'm just saying nothing's impossible.
Well, So the question is, so an ectopic pregnancy is a pregnancy that a fertilized egg is outside of the womb. So,
Also with fallopian tubes, which is a child is not born.
yeah. I understand what you're saying, John. Chances are it will result in the death of the baby and the death of, well, certainly the death of the baby, the death of the mother as well. So that becomes the question.
Are we getting into difficult topics yet, or? Because I still have kind of a general.
Yes. So the question is, the question was, what do we do with difficult circumstances? So let's begin by saying this. What do we include in difficult circumstances?
Rape and incest.
Is that what we include in a difficult, or is that what the world's including in difficult?
Yeah, that's what the world.
Yeah,
says.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then if that's the list we're talking about, then what else can people say is a difficult circumstance? Huh?
Not having enough money to research.
So poverty, I think life of the mother is obvious one, but when we talk about the world, their reasoning for difficult circumstances, they say things like poverty or social pressure or unplanned pregnancy, those kind of things,
Teenage pregnancy.
teenage pregnancy. Those are,
Define unplanned, I mean, if you're gonna, there's always the possibility, so how is that unplanned?
that's just the phrase that we use, right? The unplanned pregnancy just includes anything where you're not actively, purposefully trying to get pregnant. I understand the biology behind it all and why that may be a bad phrase, but we understand what we mean by unplanned pregnancy, right? So there are, and it's not that we don't acknowledge real hardship sometimes when people get pregnant, right? Even the situation,
Are we gonna include like, a child that is Down syndrome or something, I mean,
you
the
could,
world would
yes.
say that, I know we're
Yeah.
not going to, but I think the world is.
So any sort of health challenges,
They can see, I mean, way more,
and where do we stop with that?
special needs, I guess, issues.
If we're to begin doing that, where do we stop with that? So you talk about Down syndrome, oh, go ahead, sorry.
So they have companies now that can do all the testing to let parents know, people that are doing in vitro. They can go beyond that, they can tell them, this is gonna be a male, he's gonna be highly intelligent, all these things, do you want this one? Or would you rather have this girl over here that's gonna be this, or that? I mean, they're really getting, and they,
Yeah.
this guy had very good reasoning why it was all ethical. I mean, he made such good sense.
To better the population and all that kind of stuff.
Like it wasn't unethical what they were doing.
And I'd also say
That's
like,
eugenics is
Hold
what
on.
that's called.
Yeah, hold on.
And if you are carrying if a mom is carrying multiples, and they say that you, for better chance of survival, you have to pick one to, that's a difficult circumstance.
Talk to mom.
That's a real thing, it was a TV show.
More than
Yeah,
one egg or embryo to
Right.
try to make it stick,
so let's,
all those.
yeah, we're not talking about in vitro yet, we will talk about in vitro, we're not there yet. Because that's almost a whole other category. I know it's hard, I want to try to focus us in, so let's first address what the world might call difficult circumstances. At this point, I'm leaving out medical issues. We'll get to that in a second, right? So how do we answer the difficult circumstances of poverty or social pressure or unplanned pregnancy, or even things like, yeah, that's poverty issues, or even like the genetics of the child.
I would say, for me, we were not married, I did not even know Daniel. I thought that there was 4 siblings and it was actually his brother and his brother's wife. I thought they were brother and sister. Anyway, I didn't know that.
Which is real weird.
And, so I had 2 kids. I was a single mom, I went to that church, and his sister, Pam, was like, I'm going to watch your kids whenever you need me to. You just tell me, and I'll watch your kids. Like, the church has to step in and help those people. Like, the church has to become the church.
That's certainly true, right? And I'm not undermining what you're saying there. That's 100% true. But before we even get to that question, we have to answer the question of how do we come to us and say, well, this is why I'm doing it, right?
That's what I'm saying. We have to meet those people where they are and actually be willing to give of ourselves to help them.
So I guess.
I agree.
That they would have.
But right now I'm talking about the moral question, right? This is an ethics, like, how do we approach this from an ethical standpoint? I get what you're saying about the role and responsibility of the church.
Well, no, I think, first I'll tell them why it's wrong and where it's.
Yes, we have to. That's what I'm trying to get. We have to start with.
That's what she's saying.
Yeah, we have to get there. I'm not disagreeing with you,
Not just say
Yeah,
that,
just say like, it's
but
bad.
follow it up.
but yes, I understand what you're saying, but we have to start somewhere, right? It's either right now we're asking the question: is it right or wrong? Are these legitimate concerns or not? Okay, that's where I'm trying to start. So when we talk about right now, we'll put this under the category of a fertilized, implanted in the correct place egg, right? In the womb of the mother. All these external things are not, or we talk about what's the great mantra of our world right now when it comes to abortion.
My body, my choice.
My body, my choice, right? And it's not that we as Christians don't believe in the autonomy of the individual. We do. We just believe that that baby has autonomy as well and has rights. And so, yes, your body, your choice, but you don't get to decide what happens to someone else's body, even if that body is inside of you. It's different. So when we talk about poverty or social pressures or unplanned pregnancy or so on and so forth, we can recognize the hardship, and I think that's where Luann was going. We can recognize those hardships, but then maintain that that hardship does not justify the taking of innocent life. It never does. Now, at the same time, and I was going to get there, it requires the church to do something. The church and the society should support mothers and families. All right. What do we do in issues such as, again, rape or incest?
They could give them for adoption if they feel they can't raise the child.
Yes, but this is such I'm going to play the role, right? This is such a traumatic experience. I don't know why you would expect me to carry this child of such a bad thing to full term and go through all that, to feel that baby inside me, right?
It's not about your feelings, it's about the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can acknowledge that something horrible has happened to you, speaking to the mother.
Yes. We can
Right.
acknowledge profound injustice and
Yes.
trauma.
Yes,
Yes.
you have to acknowledge that and empathize with what they went through and what this pregnancy will mean as far as keeping the baby. But at the same time, you don't want to add to that injustice, the further injustice of killing your unborn child.
Yes. There is that child, regardless of how he came into this world, has a moral status, a moral status. It's going to require pastoral sensitivity. It's going to require patience. But we must affirm the unborn child's moral status.
And had nothing to do with the
Yes, he or she, whatever the baby is, has nothing to do with those circumstances. Okay, so now, difficult circumstances. Let's go into more difficult circumstances. What do we do when there's a threat of life to the mother? Threat of death to the mother's life.
I think the doctor needs to do everything he or she can to save both.
I don't understand your question. You're saying, what are we to do as far as?
I'm just saying, how do we answer the question morally? I'm sorry. Like, how do we handle this as a objection or so here, to some degree or another, for the moment, we have to take moments and handle this issue somewhat dispassionately. Now that's hard to do, right? Because it's a very passionate issue. But so first we go, okay, well, what is the ethical principle? And then we can deal with everything else. But what do we do in the situation, or I don't know how else to say it, how do we view this situation where there's a threat to the mother's life?
It's the same as if somebody comes from the hospital, if the fetus is endangering the mother's life, then it's self-defense. I mean, if what we're actually talking about is an ectopic pregnancy, or is something that there is no way the mother survives, then
Isn't that God's way of, he's not validating this pregnancy by the baby dying, so.
My question is, because we were talking about like moral ethic, okay, is this, so ethically, if you are blessed to have a husband and a wife, I would think that they would be coming up with the decision.
Okay, yeah. But what if they were coming to you and saying, Dorsey, what's your advice to us? What is our responsibility ethically? So I understand again too, like we're not binding people's conscience in this conversation. We're just thinking through a hard conversation together.
What outside of that puts a mother's life in danger that would cause it to? I don't know anything outside of that. Or I know there's like preeclampsia is very dangerous for women. And I know even in today's age that women have died from that.
I think there's also molar pregnancies,
I have no idea.
which would cause some issues. It's basically where the I don't know the right nomenclature, but the implanted egg basically begins to reproduce cells to the point where it doesn't ever actually develop a body, but it basically becomes cancerous and reproduces.
To me, that would definitely fall under
Well,
that.
if the mother was shot, I mean, if there was like something like that, there's a bullet wound and you have to go in and do surgery and it may,
There's also what Fran just had this happen where the bile duct actually, because of pregnancy, stopped. And so she got in a toxic for her body, and it was caused by pregnancy. So so it's a choice of this child is actually killing me because my body's not ridding of the poisons in it. So that would be, and that's just recently happened.
Yeah, and I don't have an extensive list of all. Yeah.
That's the only thing I was like, what else is that? I don't know all of
So
that.
I guess you're
To
asking
make that-
more of like that type of situation where it's.
Yes.
not-
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
To what end though?
I don't know. You have to say more.
Outside of not murder, what else does God say about anything like that? I mean, is there anything else? 'Cause I don't know the Bible, so maybe I should, but is there something else that the Bible says about anything like that outside of do not murder?
Well, it's preserve life.
Yes.
And so part of what we have to advocate is preserving the life of the mother. The baby cannot survive outside the womb at that age, right, at that stage.
Yes.
So that's the ethical issue is, how do I preserve the life of mom?
And do the best you can to
And do the
preserve the
best you
life
can
of the
to
baby.
preserve the life of the baby,
Yes.
but you're not gonna preserve the life of the baby
If
if
you
you
can't
allow
preserve-
mom to die.
Right, so, yeah.
Yeah. And there's
And I think there would be a good, that right there would be your basis on where you would go on how this affects the mother and the stage of life of the baby cannot live outside the womb. I think that right there would be your standard of care on any, like, going forward on that.
well, and again, we're not asking necessarily
That would
we're
be
not
my
determining. Yeah.
ethical view on
Yeah.
it.
We're not determining care.
Sure.
We're speaking to an ethical issue, right?
But
Yeah.
That would be my standard of my ethics, how that works, how that plays out with the doctor's advice and da, 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 da.
So part of what I'm hearing is that we believe that the ethics of this issue in regards to the Bible is that we do our best to preserve both lives where possible. But we also at times need to make some hard decisions. But I hear at least one dissenting voice.
A lot of it, this ain't gonna be popular, but if you try 27 times and you keep coming up with the same result, common sense says, look, maybe this is not something we should try anymore.
Yeah, that's a different conversation, I guess. I do understand what you're saying, right? So if you're a couple and you continue to have these type of issues, there's a
Baby keeps dying.
right.
You know,
There's wisdom in saying, I knew a couple, and the husband asked me one time, the wife was short on something. I can't remember what it was. It was some sort of, whenever she found out she was pregnant, she had to take this certain pill because otherwise it would cause a miscarriage. And I remember the father came to me at one point, the husband came to me at one point and said, you know, in between when we're trying to have kids, we don't take this. And I'm feeling convicted about that. Like, because we understand there's a hostile environment and we're allowing it to remain. And I was like, yeah, you are. Like, it's one of those things where I never would have thought about it, but when he said it and he's like, I feel convicted about this, I'm like, if you feel convicted, you should probably do something about that. Either take steps so that you're definitely not, you know, if you're not trying to have a baby, definitely don't try to have a baby, whatever kind of birth control or whatever you have to do, or always be taking this thing if you're not going to be careful. So, yeah, that becomes, that's an interesting conversation, but it still comes back to, yes, I agree with you that sometimes we need to have hard conversations with people saying, hey, there's a lot of other ways that you can go about having children, even if not naturally.
Maybe it's a controversial opinion, but I don't even understand why we're even having a conversation about abortion. I mean, you got all the contraception you can have, you have all the education you have, and yet we're still having the same conversation. It's like, use it and you probably won't get pregnant. But if you get pregnant because
I'm going to ask you a question in response.
Yeah.
Are you without sin?
Oh, I'm not saying that.
Well, but hold on. So why do you keep sinning? You know that it's wrong. Why do you keep doing it?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Like, I mean, the answer to the question, I guess, is it happens because we're sinful creatures, right?
Well, where's the sin about putting on a shower cap or something like that? You know,
Well, no, I'm not saying that is sinful, but you're asking the question. You're asking the question, why does it continue to happen? And the answer is because we are sinful human beings. And it's going to keep happening because we're sinful.
or stupid and negligent.
But here's the thing. If you're only going to use this as that conversation, like you can say your own personal sins don't affect another life necessarily, although Molly may disagree. The question still comes back of like, why do you keep doing it? Are you stupid?
Well, the answer would probably be
Yeah. Right, but I mean like,
Gelato.
you're a woman that says, I've had 4 abortions, like, lady.
Yeah.
I mean, can't you just
I'm also
protect yourself?
But Michael, also people can get pregnant while they're on
I was
birth
on birth
control.
control and got pregnant.
Birth control.
Okay, but I'm gonna throw
And all those
something
other
else
elements
out,
as well.
and you all are gonna say like, be quiet, but.
I promise I won't say that.
You know, what about where it talks about when Onan was killed for spilling his seed? Again, this is something that I personally began to grapple with after Mary Kristen died. And
Yeah.
that was, Lord, I want you to control this area of my life. Again, I don't push it on my children, Chris knows this, but I had Craig when I was 40. It was, you know, we, and of course, you all know the marriage didn't last, but I had all these blessings, and each time I would be like, oh, wow, this is such a blessing, like, we really, and again, I have never pushed it on anyone, but the whole, you know, birth control in itself is another issue.
Yeah, so
And I think we as women here,
Yeah.
we would probably all say that, so, I
Yeah, so I do think there's multiple layers to this. I do think we could go down the rabbit trail of prescription type birth controls, and I think that certainly falls under this issue. I think the verse you're talking about probably is, while I probably at the end of the day am going to agree with you, is maybe a little off topic. Yeah.
I said you were gonna tell me to be quiet.
Yeah.
But I did bring up something that not going there.
Right.
But going to, to something about, if we are trying to control the Lord in every area of our life, and I know I can be a control freak, so.
Right.
Again, guilty, but I do know that this was an area that I really wanted business, and I wanted
Yeah.
guidance. And it was after something.
Yeah. No, but at the same time, and again, I don't want to go down this rabbit trail too much. I do think so the way Luann and I have always handled it is just knowing where we're at in the month, right? Like, so I don't think there's necessarily it's always wrong to say, hey, this month we're going to intentionally avoid this so that it doesn't have this outcome. I don't think that's sinful. I do think there are times where there are times where I think you're right and we're just completely not trusting in God and receiving his blessings and things like that. Now, there does become the issue that we could fall under here, that certainly falls under here of, there's a lot of things like the pill and even any kind of medical birth control. A lot of times its last ditch effort is to make a hostile environment in the womb, which basically prevents implantation.
So it allows the sperm and this egg to unite, but then, which again,
It can't implant. It's creating a hostile environment.
Yeah, it prevents life.
Yes.
It does, but it doesn't kill. So I'm not sure how that.
So it's an embryo.
it's an embryo, it's live.
Okay, so I wasn't going to go here yet. So let's talk about this, because I was asked, what is the difference between an embryo and an implanted egg, or is there a difference?
An embryo is when the sperm and the egg are come together. Like, an implanted egg, it's never gonna become anything because it needs the sperm to be.
No, I'm sorry. I'm talking about the difference between a fertilized egg versus a implanted fertilized egg.
There's no difference.
Okay.
Just location is the only difference, right?
Location,
And
viability at this
yeah,
point.
yeah. But I think they're both still considered a human life.
So did y'all hear that question? Why? Yes.
Because you have a fertilized egg. You have unique DNA.
Yes.
Okay.
It's still, well, I'll wait.
Go ahead.
Women have fertilized eggs that don't implant a lot.
Right, but that's a natural process that our body does. When you take something out of our body and you do it unnaturally, you are killing that embryo.
Man trying to be God.
Yeah, and trying to be done.
This is where I think in Christian circles we'll get different answers, right? And the question is, where do we fall on, and certainly I don't think you're wrong. I think there are a lot of times where eggs are fertilized, they don't implant, and they come out through natural processes of, the question is, does it change when we start to willfully control that? Or when we begin to affect it? Yeah, I already pointed this way, but I'll get you next.
I'm just curious in your point of view, is it morally objective to, as a man, to even discuss this type of conversation when you have women?
So,
Not those, but
when-
those who say,
When you began that question,
if you can't get pregnant, then it's none of your business.
when you began
How would you respond to that?
when you began that sentence, I was going to say, my job here is not to take positions. I'm here to moderate the conversation. And now that I heard the question, I'm going to answer it because I feel very strongly about it. Absolutely, we're allowed to have this conversation. Absolutely. It takes two to get pregnant, but we are all moral human agents. And we have the ability it's like saying, I don't know, I'm trying to come up with some good other example of this, but like, well, two men got in a fight, so women, you can't talk about it because men are fighting, right? Like, and he killed one, so we only have to have I don't know, it just there becomes this silliness of, once we go down that road, then we've opened up the door for all kinds of things of, yeah.
Women don't have to serve in the military, so why?
Well, that's a different conversation.
I'm just saying, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander type of thing, right?
Well, no, I don't even think that has anything to do with it. I think it has to do with us being moral.
Men have to be leaders.
Yeah. Well, both men and women are created in the image of God. We all have the same moral and ethical standard. So what's true for one of us is true for both of us. And that's where I think we have to approach this conversation. So it has nothing to do with all the other noise that comes into this conversation. It has to do with that rooted foundational fact. Rusty.
Okay, I like to say this. I'm guilty of it. When you do the birth control pills, in Genesis, God says multiply. And he wants us to multiply. And he still wants us to multiply. So if you do the birth control pill, you're taking that life away that could be born. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, yeah, I think there's a lot of conversation we could have about birth control, medical birth control. I think it's terrible for females' bodies. That's my personal opinion. I think it causes more. I think the artificial. I just lost the word. Say what did you say? Oh, all of that is actually fueled. That industry, I don't think intentionally, but necessarily, but it's fueled by women being on birth control for years and then coming off birth control and having a hard time getting pregnant because of the birth control. It does stuff to the body that this is my personal opinion and just through research and the influence of my wife, that,
I think it could cause miscarriage too.
well, yeah, there's a lot of issues that it causes, I think, that are, young ladies, if you've never been on birth control, my encouragement to you is, one, do a lot of research, two, talk to some women in this church who have been through it, and three, very seriously consider whether or not it's a thing that you even want to go down that road, because once you go down that road, you can't come back off that road. But all that notwithstanding, I do think we want to be careful to a degree, because I do think there's being thoughtful about how you plan your family is not wrong. I don't think that's wrong. Like if you just had a child and you're like, hey, we don't want to have a second child right away, it's okay to be thoughtful about that. Like, so I don't want us to ever get to the point where we're saying it's never okay to be thoughtful about how we reproduce. I don't think that's being disobedient to the be fruitful and multiply. But it's also kind of a different conversation as well.
So I like what you're saying, because you're not only just saying be thoughtful, you're bringing it before the lawyers.
Yeah.
You're talking to us, reminding us that to bring this, and I guess the younger, bringing it together before.
Yes. Well, and it's hard, because the reality is, if you have not already either, one, dealt with these issues yourself, you know someone, whether you realize it or not, who has dealt with these issues, or you're going to deal with someone who's dealing with these issues. And how do we speak to these things? How do we talk into these things? And there's still some parts of it that I'm even like, man, I'll tell you, probably in our house, my wife is a teetotaler. She is like, life is life is life. There is no excuse for. I tend to argue there's some extreme circumstances where I feel like there can be some hard conversations that need to be had. But we need to be having those hard conversations when there does seem to be a threat to the mother's life that we can very distinctly note. I do think at all times we have to seek to protect both lives to the best of our ability at all times. But that I do think. Now the reality is, when we talk about those situations, they are extremely rare. They are not common. And that's the important thing. Even when we talk about, I've often said this, I think the church has become a little too bullheaded. Because more often than not, when people talk about reasons for abortion, they say, well, what about rape and incest? And my immediate response has been, okay, I'll give you that one. Give me all the other ones. I'll start there. If that's your only excuse right now, I will gladly take all the other ones right now. Now, it doesn't mean that I think that ethically is right for the rape and incest ones either.
But you're willing to go incrementally.
But I'm willing to go incrementally.
Yeah.
Like if that's our only,
What, that's like 1%?
it's less than 1%.
Less than 1%?
Yes. When you talk about, Trey and I were looking at this the other day. We were talking about the church. Something at school he was doing, and he was looking at the church, and there's a lack of ministers that are coming down the pipeline, particularly from his generation, and it was staggering. Like half of it, like it was like 40% of a generation was aborted. It was staggering.
They use abortion as birth control,
Yeah.
and they use divorce as marriage control.
Yeah.
And I think in all of these conversations, our starting point should be the sovereignty of God.
Yes. Yes.
Because I think that as men, and we've come so far in medicine, technology, and pointing to the artificial insemination, why aren't we looking at people you were talking about, whose child needs somebody?
Yeah.
You know, and why aren't we looking at those examples? And, you know, when they get lost in all this mess, of a man trying to control a future.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
What about the babies that are born that is it against this commandment to not save them? I mean, think of the length of time it takes for a very small preemie to ever get out of the hospital. Was it God's will that that baby be saved like that, or, and then is it wrong for a doctor not to save the baby?
I mean, I would say absolutely. If we have the ability to save, we should save. Yeah. And it's amazing. Like that's the hard rub of modern medicine, right? Because you talk about children who are born today, who like very prematurely, who are cared for and protected and grow and have fruitful lives that 100 years ago would have been never would have happened. Like that part of when we talk about medicine, that's amazing, right? That happens.
But you can't have both ways. You can't say it's God's sovereignty that, you interfere with God's sovereignty if you try to have a baby without, it just being a totally natural thing. But it's not God's sovereignty if you say to a baby that, that could not possibly
Yeah.
live without you doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, are they not both God's sovereignty?
You have factories out there producing these eggs. There are millions of frozen embryos out there right now. Millions. That, and you know, who knows what's gonna happen with those. And, you know, it's disgusting what we're doing with the technology that we have.
Yeah.
We're not contemplating God in all of this.
And I think probably the answer is not either or, because I think you're certainly right. I think you make a very good point, Earl. Are we doing it the best way that we could do it?
Are we being responsible?
Yeah, are we being responsible?
You know,
Which,
So in Genesis 3, what do they mean? Are they talking about the seed of the embryo?
so when you're talking about the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, that's genealogy, that's lineage. Yeah, that's offspring. Yeah, so that's something wholly different. I don't want to move past this issue as far as reproduction until we do talk about. We've hinted around it, but we haven't really talked about IVF really. But we're out of time. So we're going to pick up next time with IVF practices and talk through some of those issues of how we deal with that. And again, there is some hard line in all this, I do think, that we have to recognize. I think that really hit the nail on the head of what Earl kind of said is we can't say it's all a sovereignty of God issue if we're willing to step in to preserve life, and then not say that, well, God is also sovereign over other things. But at the same time, it doesn't mean just because we're able to do it that God sovereignly is meaning that we should do it either. So it's that finding that balance between what we're able to do and what we should do, I guess. So we'll pick that up next time, the in vitro fertilization. And we still haven't even talked about things like euthanasia, assisted suicide, suicide itself. We haven't talked about just war.
Which there was a big case in England
Yeah.
just last week about euthanasia.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Government stepped in and okayed it
Wow. There you go.
Was that the young woman that?
in England, yes.
So we'll pick this up next time. So probably what's going to end up happening is we're not going to get through the 10. We have 3 weeks left. And we're not going to get through the 10 Commandments. So we'll probably end up, before our summer break, we'll get as far as we can get. We'll put a pin in it for the summer, and then we'll pick it back up in the fall.
If you don't finish your work, you gotta keep going.
Eventually Sunday morning.
Sunday morning.
We'll keep going after.
Yeah. Well, then we're not going to leave tonight until we finish. Let me close this in prayer. Father in heaven, we do thank you for this time, and we just thank you for being here with us through this conversation. It's a hard thing, and we have to acknowledge that we are not God. And so we have to lean and rest and trust in you in these areas, that we make the best decision that we can make with the information we're given, and trust on your grace and your mercy. Lord, we need that in all areas of our life, not just in this. Will you be with us now and strengthen us as we look forward to this weekend, as we get to come and worship you, that it would be something that we long for, to be amongst God's people, worshiping together. We pray all this in Jesus' holy name. Amen. So we can pick up all the tables, fix the chair.